Hello and welcome to the first issue of the Morning Report, which is a Tulsa based real estate report of all things local in Tulsa. And we're calling it the Morning Report, even though we're recording, was it Tuesday, November the 18th at 2:33 in the afternoon. I'm Stephen Brooks, joined by Gannon Brown. How you doing, bro?
Fitting. Yes, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. So we built this studio. How long did it take you to build the studio, you think?
I don't know. I'm starting to lose track of time, but I don't know, maybe 10 hours tops.
So why don't we tell everyone first? Why don't you tell everyone who you are, where we are, what we do, and the purpose of this podcast?
So I'm Gannon Brown. I am a 13-year vet in the real estate industry in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've done a little bit of everything, but currently I'm the CEO and one of the founders of More Agency here in Tulsa. So yeah, Tulsa's first and only professionals only real estate brokerage.
Yes. So I am one of the other co-founders of it, along with Gannon's mother, Carol Brown. The three of us formed the brokerage just over a year ago now, and we've had this room sat there vacant. We knew we wanted to do a podcast studio. Came back from a seminar last week, and you pretty much took it upon yourself to build this thing. So how long do you think it took? How many hours?
I mean, I think there's probably 10 hours of, physical and probably another 10 of research between Alejandro, shout out Alejandro behind the ones and twos over there. And then, just me sitting on the couch at night trying to figure out what are we going to buy? Why are we going to buy it? How are we going to plug it all together and then troubleshoot it?
So the purpose of this is to act as basically an information guide for you as a consumer as to all things going on in Tulsa, all things local in Tulsa. Get to know some of the agents here at More Agency, get to know how we work as a group, but to also give you big picture of what we're seeing in this real estate market. So if someone asked you, Gannon, this year, describe to me the Tulsa real estate market in 2025 as we get ready to come to the year end, what is it you would tell someone how this market has been this year?
It's been a crazy year, and I don't think we're finished necessarily, even though the year's coming to the end. I don't think we're done with kind of the crazy. I think it's been pretty volatile. I think that consumers are unsure what to expect. I think that the agents are having trouble setting correct expectations. I think that sellers are wondering what's going on with their houses as some times on market have extended. We're coming off of a kind of a topsy turvy couple of years, and I think that we're not quite to the end there where we find, stability and hopefully the end of the bottom and we start to traject back up. But I feel like we've got to be closer to that than further away at this point. And, as we come back out of it, I'm hoping there is the ability to project some stability and, take things, in a little bit different direction, especially on the communication side of things.
Yeah, one of the things that is interesting is NAR, for those of you who don't know, is the National Association of Realtors. Just had a big event in Houston. It's their next event, I think they call it, where they kind of bring out all their predictions for the year and talk about everything NAR is going to do. And they said they think next year nationally we'll see 15% more homes sold than this year. Kind of a difficult thing to get your head around when affordability is still what it is. And for some people with their interest rate locked in where they are, that's difficult. So if people come up to you right now and they're telling you, hey, I think my house is worth X, and you're looking at the data and that's not the case, how are you trying to temper expectations for people? Because everyone wants to everyone wants to believe, sorry, that the house is worth more than it actually is. But when the market tells you it's not, how are people taking that? What are you seeing in that regard from listings?
I think value is such an interesting equation. One of the things you have to take into mind is to keep up with this appreciation curve of your home. You have to put money into it, right? It's not that just some stagnant thing. You build it once, you never touch it again, and it increases in value at some exponential rate, especially percentages year on year, right? There's a base there, but it's not the highest multiplier that you can get as far as your value increasing. So you're going to have to spend money to get the money, right? So that means, keeping up with some general maintenance stuff. You're going to have to, make some improvements. If you're not, competitive with the modern amenities of what, best case pricing is going to be, then you can't expect those premiums on, again, the appreciation numbers that are talked about on the whole for the marketplace. So I think that's number one. Number two is, every single home is its own microcosm, has its own story, where it is in the neighborhood, what school districts you're in, what part of the city you're in, what do you back up to, all of those things start to factor into it. So you have to take that into consideration as well. What I do like is that those projections are in the positive, right? So if you're doing the right things, you should be able to capitalize on that. Unfortunately, what happens is as we have more inventory enter into the marketplace, the ability to capitalize on that becomes harder if you're not competitive in the landscape of other homes compared to you, right? So you need to check those boxes and then show up and price right to even be able to capitalize on, a couple of percentage points of appreciation. Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 6. These are some average numbers, right? But if you're going to capitalize on the high side, you really need to check all the boxes, right?
Historically, Tulsa's seen about 3 to 4% rate appreciation every year, and obviously that got thrown sideways with what we saw through COVID. And now it seems, at large, what's happening is in the states is there that people are trying to figure out a way to solve the affordability issue. So that kind of brings us to today's talking point, which is this proposal that we're hearing of coming from the Federal Housing Association, or Federal House FHFA group. They're talking about we want to bring out a 50-year mortgage. Now, initially, what was your gut reaction when you heard that a 50-year mortgage had been proposed?
You know, 50 is such a big number. My initial reaction was like, "Oh, man, you could get one mortgage for most of your life." I don't know. I think average male life expectancies is somewhere in their 70s. So if you bought a house when you were 25, and you had a 50-year mortgage, like you're not paying off that house until you're 75. So number one, I think that's a long time. But it's really interesting to think about it kind of from both sides of the table. And so I just was kind of doing some research, and obviously the goal with a 50-year mortgage, the thought process is how do we easily lower the monthly affordability scale, since most people are still borrowing money when they're buying a home today,
Mhm.
right? And this is an easy way to extend that. Um, the median monthly homeowner cost increased to $2,035 a month in 2024. Meaning that lower payments would help ease that pressure on affordability. I thought that was really interesting. And then first time home buyers spent 58% of their income on mortgages in 2024 versus 30% only in 2019. So you can feel that press coming, from just the numbers alone. And the idea is that like extending this would, create some pressure, create some easing there. And, on top of just the money side of things, then you've had this price increase. And JP Morgan Chase stat, housing prices have increased 50% from 2019 to 2024. So, these longer AM schedules would really help buyers step into that affordability scale. I think that there's trade-offs to everything, right? And so, those are just some stats. I can totally understand where the immediate rationale comes from. I'm curious, what's your two
Yeah,
cents
I think
reaction?
it's an absolute terrible idea. If I had any clients that had a choice between a 30 and a 50-year, I'd not advise on a 50-year whatsoever. The interest you're going to be paying on a 50-year loan over the life of it is going to be absolutely obscene. I mean, if you've looked at it on a 30-year loan, the amount you pay back if you stay there for the entire 30 years, and again, the average American is only in their home 5 to 8 years. So it's not really the concept behind it. If you listen to people that are pro this, is you're not going to be in your house that long anyway. You're not going to build that much in your house, equity in your house anyway, and we're trying to make it as affordable as possible. If you look at average $400,000 loan, 6.3%, it says here your monthly payment versus a 30 and a 50-year drops $280 a month. Now that is a big swing, and that may help the average family. The downside to that is you pay 425,000 over the life of the loan if you stayed in there for its entirety. Chances are you're not going to. I think the concept behind this to some degree is anything that can be done to make it more affordable to buy a house is a positive,
Mm.
and no one stays in their house for 30 years anyway, and equity is something that most people don't appreciate anyway, so we're just going to do what we can to increase and help home ownership. I don't think this is the way you solve home ownership. I'm a big advocate for improving affordability. And by that, I mean building something and creating something that is cheaper for people to purchase, right? Do we need to keep building 3 2s with a 2 car garage for the average first time home buyer or kid out of college who has a girlfriend or boyfriend, and or maybe they're single and they're earning enough to try and buy a house and make a mortgage payment work? They don't need a 3 2. It doesn't make sense for them to buy it. You and me know the stat well. 60%, an American lives in, on average, 60% of their home. That means 40% is wasted.
Mhm.
Right, that's why you're seeing the talk of the silver tsunami coming, where people are going to right size in their properties. This is not how you fix the housing issue in America. It's building more and building more affordable, and I don't think this is necessarily the way. Now they're also proposing portable loans, which you and I discussed a little bit earlier, which is confusing messaging because they've not said one way or the other how that would actually work.
Mhm.
If you were to solve the mortgage crisis in this way, what would you be looking to do of the two options of the portable loan?
The portable loan is really interesting, and I think we should give some context. So, I'm doing my own research. I'm trying to understand this, just because both of these, as far as I know, have not been historically proposed. I don't have great information there, but I couldn't find any data out there that says these conversations have been had in the historical past of any sort of significance to where it was documented. I may be wrong there, but that was just off the cuff research. That being said, the what's interesting about the portable loan side of things is like, what's portable, right? Are you getting to take who's benefiting from that? Is it the buyer of the home? Is it the seller of the home? So,
Yeah, because this is where the debate is, right? So
right.
depending, it's a really important thing. Like if you're reading about portable loans online in any news source, the FHFA have not actually come out and said what they're defining as a portable loan. If you read the quote, it says they're looking to expand how to make mortgages assumable or portable. So there are two schools of thought here, right? One is that the seller gets to take their mortgage with them. So, for example, let's say you owe $300,000 on your home at 3%. You could take that with you when you buy your new home and you finance out the remaining of that purchase price of the new home at today's rate. Or the other concept, which is commonly known as the assumable loan, is that you would sell your home and that 300,000 you owned, the person buying it from you would be able to get that mortgage and take that over and also get another mortgage to finance the delta. Now, what that would do for you is give you all your equity, but you would get all your equity today, right? If your house is priced right.
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily think that's the way to solve it. So of the two, what's your preference? You could just pick one, you lean towards one way. You want the buyer to take the mortgage with them, or you want the seller to take the mortgage with them, or the buyer to get the benefit of it. What do you think would grease the wheels better in the market?
I think both have their complexities, right? To me, it seems that the bureaucratic battle and economic battle that would have to be fought on the 50-year mortgage, it just doesn't seem like it has
Mhm.
a lot of possibility there. Between the Fed having to back that, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, also the banks, having to be on board with offering that product.
Well, actually, I don't know if this is going through conventional loaning because it could just end up being a Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loan, and you might not see it through conventional lenders. They might not want to do it.
Exactly, but then they would have to be on board with it too. I mean, so that's a big bureaucracy that would need to
Mhm.
sign off on. Here's how the moving pieces of that, the logistics would play out. And I think one of the things that they have to consider is, you know, all things being taken into consideration. If you're on a projection of an increasing value market, then a long AM schedule doesn't mean that there's a lot of damage. Where it really comes into play is if we start to have any sort of decline in values, especially in some of these more volatile markets. We're in a very stable market, so we don't
Mhm.
get affected. But if you've not built equity quickly in a declining market like that, now you've got upside down loans, and these massive institutions are
Yeah.
the
So
ones
what
that have
you're
to deal
meaning
with it.
is if someone took on a 50-year loan,
Hmm.
prices decrease, they go to sell in 5 to 8 years, like the average American does. They're stuck trying to pay off a mortgage that they have far less equity in than if they took a 30 or 15 year
Yeah.
because they try to get a lower payment. Okay. So
Or are upside down in completely because they didn't build any equity, and now the value of the home has decreased over their ownership.
it's like if someone takes 100% loan out now to finance property, or
Mm,
103% if they get a professional's loan to do
mhm,
that.
mhm,
So
mhm.
back to the question though, if you could pick, would you do it where the seller gets to take the mortgage with them? You think that would have a better effect on the market and
Yeah.
improve it, or the buyer coming in and assuming the seller's loan? What would work better for you?
I think that the if I wanted to try something, I
Mhm.
would try the first, which is,
The
you
seller
as
taking it with them.
the seller taking it with them, meaning they would go and those who have good interest rates, they get to continue to capitalize on those. If you didn't buy during great interest rate times, You don't get to capitalize
Now,
on that.
what's the concept behind that? Why do you think that would work better?
The reason I'm thinking, because we already have assumable loans today, is my theory, right? So you can,
Mhm.
as a matter of fact, most conventional loans are assumable. The problem with that is, to assume said loan, you have to take out this person who typically has a pretty good equity stance because they've seen home values increase and they got a good interest rate. So they've been building equity
Mhm.
quickly on the payment side of things. You have to take them out of that position. And that takes a lot of cash and a lot of capital. And that's not the affordability problem that we're trying to fight. So being able to allow those folks to move on, and somebody else who still has to hurdle something to get into the market to make an acquisition, that's their prerogative. They have to determine what makes sense for them based on just general current day economics if they're not already currently a homeowner. If you're currently a homeowner and you want to capitalize, what I think happens there is it allows the freeing up of a lot of shifting of real estate, which in turn is going to churn the economy. And I think that would be a good thing. And it's not something we have access to now. So that's my rationale of saying, if I had to pick one right now, I would go that way. What about you?
I think I'll do the sellers going with it too. Reason for that being the vast majority of people when they move house step up.
Mm,
Therefore, when you step up, it becomes more expensive. So if something is you can remove the cost prohibitive nature of it, you're more likely to increase the inventory on the lower end. Again, we have an affordability issue. So making the more expensive homes, putting more expensive homes on the market isn't going to benefit the market at large. What's going to benefit the market at large is going to those families that have the two ones, the three twos in Florence Park that they bought for 250 grand and are now worth $300,000-400,000, and they've got $150,000 in equity in there. But when you talk to them about moving, they don't want to move because what they need to buy, number one, is more expensive than they would like to take on, and the current interest rate makes it cost prohibitive. So if they owe 250 grand on their current, or say 200 grand on their house now, and they can take that 200 grand forward and free up $200,000 in equity,
mm,
that makes their life a lot easier in buying their new house, right? So if they're going to go from a $300 to a $600,000, which is a common jump we see in Tulsa, right? That's the
sure.
step you take. One third of it is going to be at your 3%. In theory, one third of it you could pay immediately with cash down, and the final third would be at today's market rate. So they're only getting a $200,000 loan at 6%. That's what makes sense to grease the wheels moving forward because, again, you need more homes. We have an inventory shortage at large on a national level, and those homes typically are what more people can afford, and more people can afford the lower price point homes. That just makes sense.
I'm curious, the borrowing of money doesn't just happen on primary residences, right? So I'm curious your 2 cents on what would either one of these, mortgage proposals that are on the table right now, kind of no matter the variation of the portable side, what do you think that does to the investment game?
I really, I think the mortgages, the investment game in itself is so complicated, right? Because you have all cash buyers, you have 100% loan people, you have people that will purchase, like we've done on construction loans, that we rehab them, get them ready, refine to conventional when we've got the equity in them from being taken care of. And I don't think that's something that, well, reality being, I've not given the investment side any thought
Hmm.
because I don't think the investment side is going to be the focus. I
Hmm.
think very much the next election cycle is going to be all about affordability, economy at large, housing, two massive issues. And anything that can be done to make those affordable, the better. Now, if there's one thing that could be done to bring in the investment side into this, and we've heard people talk about this before, is removing any taxable gains or any issues on people selling investment properties.
Mm,
Because you and I both know people that are in their 60s, 70s that have 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes nearly 100 doors
mm,
that if they could sell 20, 30% of them and free up all that equity without being punished or hit with taxes,
mhm.
they would do so. And
Yeah.
again, that would solve the inventory crisis. You bring these doors to market. Another thing about the 50-year that could be an issue is that could make stuff more expensive across the board. We know sometimes whenever something gets subsidized, the price of it goes up because someone has to foot in the bill on part of it.
Right.
So that could be an issue where the investment game gets hit hard because they can't make the purchases. Right now, we get texts all the time from flippers and wholesalers, "Hey, do you have any deals?" Not really.
Right.
This is not a market to be doing that in. So if the 50-year did come into play, that could hinder it.
Yeah, and I also think, to your point there on the 50-year, when when you roll a product out like that, just say that it happens, right? The consuming public would go wild for that, right? I think that would stimulate a lot.
The
Um,
50-year, would you think?
Yeah, I think there would be a lot of people that would try and capitalize on that because in the perception of it is that it seems cheaper in the short term, which is
So you're saying as a temporary option, if someone had the option to go rent for 3 or 4, say 4 years
Mhm,
and spend all their money on rent and have 0 benefit,
mhm,
they're more likely to go try and take a 50 year for 4 years,
100%.
do their best to get as little equity as they can,
Mhm,
or maybe even break even
right.
and have not spent anything in the ownership. You think that they would be more likely to take that than a rent?
Or it's the shiny bell of home ownership. The great American dream outweighs the rationale to really think well through it. They're thinking, I'm just going to get my foot in the door and then I'll refi or move in a better environment. And in reality, I don't necessarily think that helps. What do think it would do is it would stimulate a lot of purchase, a lot of trading up, a lot of people thinking in the short term, I'll take a 50-year and then I'll figure out what to do after I've
Like to
got my
refi
foot
or
in the door.
whatever?
Yeah, exactly. And then what happens there is all of a sudden you have tons of properties trading hands across a lot of different price points. And then what that does is that typically drives up the values of home. So I think it almost is this reverse situation where it's like, does it drive up the home values as fast as the 50-year mortgage like actually would help
Mhm,
the AM
mhm.
schedule? It would be a very interesting a bell curve to run where it's like how slow or how fast would the appreciation of properties have to happen to be in line with the, like you said, it's a couple $100 a month and what that would change to go from a 30-year to a 50-year if you're starting to look at AM schedules, right?
So you ride it out for 3 or 4 years, you pay, $300 less a month. Hopefully, your income has gone up at your job, your life circumstances change, you refinance into a 30 year and have.
Yeah, and then maybe in the short term, property values have increased a bunch because you've got, let's just say 30% more homes trading place because you've got 30% more,
Mhm.
perceived availability. Again, it's so hard to know, but those are very interesting models that I've just kind of started to think about, and I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing, right? Trade-offs to everything.
So, in closing, I
Mm,
think one of the thing we'll see how this all pans out. I'm still going to be of the mindset that the 50 years is not going to be a crazy hot option across the board, and I think it will
mhm,
come in for a ton of criticism publicly because it will seem like the banks are the only ones that win.
right.
But if you right now are a seller in your home or you're someone who owns a property, the biggest thing we can tell you to try and do is be fully aware of the value of your home. There is nothing more important or more valuable to wealth if you look at it in America, and it's the cornerstone of most individuals' personal wealth is their property, and you have to know the value of your property. So get in touch with your realtor, have them run you a new estimate value, reach out to us, whatever. But that is something right now we'd implore anyone to do. You should be doing that annually with your realtor, having them send you those numbers to give you an update as to what's going on. That's a super important metric to be aware of. It could change things in life. I was with a lady today. She thought her house was worth 185. We talked about it. It's probably worth 220, 225. That's a big difference that she
Mhm.
wasn't aware of she had access to. So,
Uh, Contrarily, if you're a buyer in this environment, right?
mhm.
The most important thing that any buyer should be doing right now is you should be talking with somebody who is, financially plugged into the market, right? So you should be talking with a mortgage lender, a bank, however you're thinking about borrowing money if you're going to do so, because it's not one shirt fits all sizes, right? There's so many creative ways that even aren't near as risky, nowhere close to what we're talking about on the risk of maybe a 50-year
Mhm.
mortgage and the complexities that would come there. These are like totally normal, accessible solutions today. And if you're not exploring them, you won't know about them. So I would say having those conversations early so that you're better prepared whenever it's the right time to step into those solutions would be the best thing you could absolutely do.
Okay, great. Well, as always, well, this is the first time I guess we've said it, so not even as always yet. It's like the first time Alejandro over there laughing at me for saying that. But thank you for listening to the Morning Report. We'll be back again next week. If there's ever any topics you want to cover, put something in the comment section below and we can talk about it and go from there. And thank you for tuning in. Peace.
Namaste.